Okay, I am here today with Bobby Southworth, legend of the Ultimate Fighter Season 1, which we're going to come on to because of a particular day which we're recording this. Complete coincidence. But I want to do a bit of a Where Are They Now series for the website. So that's where we come in today. So just to kick us off, Bobby, first of all, how are you doing? And
I'm doing
then,
well, thank you.
yeah, great. It's good to hear. And just since we're doing a bit of a Where Are They Now, for anyone who hasn't necessarily been following what you're doing, kick us off with what does Bobby Southworth do to keep busy these days?
I'm pretty busy. I've been a martial artist for a long time, and I really got my start. I founded the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu program at American Kickboxing Academy back like in '97, and I ran it until almost 2004, where then it was taken over by Dave Camarillo. Um, and so I've actually just opened my own gym here in San Antonio, Texas. It's called AKA San Antonio, so American Kickboxing Academy San Antonio. It's a challenge because I've plenty of experience instructing, and obviously I have a wealth. I have some experience to draw from and some knowledge to impart, and but in the business aspect of it, that's where I'm kind of lacking, and so that's where the struggle is. But the gym is open. We've got about 35 students. We're having classes regularly, so I mean it's not in the black yet or turning a huge profit, but I'm happy with the students' progress. Everybody's improving. Their jujitsu is great. Their striking is coming along, and so I'm happy. So that's where I'm at. I'm just opened a new gym here in San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah, because you were coaching out of a UFC gym before, right?
I was coaching out of a UFC gym here in San Antonio for a while, and then the owners kind of used the cover of COVID to kind of sell it out from under the employees. They were planning the sale for a little while because it was like 2 or 3 weeks into COVID. They were all of a sudden like, oh, by the way, we sold the gym. Bye. And
Yeah.
it was a big gym. It wasn't like they just sold a $1.5 million facility in 2 weeks. So it was a sale that they were negotiating for a while. So they wanted out, and COVID kind of gave them the opportunity to do that. It wasn't great for me, but it happened, and life goes on.
Yeah. So, like I touched on at the start, we are recording this on January 17th. Complete coincidence, but I'm sure you know what January 17th is, right?
I do. I mean, I don't really think about it like that because in my memory, I always thought the first episode aired like sometime in March. So every year on January 17th, I get reminded because people post that famous photograph with Diego doing the splits and all of us standing around him and tag me in it. And so, it's awesome. I really don't consciously think about it, but it was a big day. It's been a while, so it's like
Mhm.
not at the forefront of my memory, but whenever somebody brings that up, it always like kind of sends you back a little bit and things start running through your head. So it was a trial, but it was good times. I really have a lot of fond memories of that. So
Yeah, I didn't realize that either until just seeing it pop up earlier today. Oh, it's 19 years since the Ultimate Fighter debuted. 19 years. Does that feel possible?
no, it doesn't. I mean, and sometimes it seems like it was so long ago, but then when you think about it cognitively, it seems like it was just the blink of an eye. It doesn't seem like it's been 20 years. I don't feel 20 years older. A little bit sometimes in my knees, but it just doesn't seem like 20 years have passed. So it's crazy.
Nah, they got to do a big celebration next year, right, for the 20th anniversary. Get all you guys together again. That'd be awesome. They should do
Maybe,
that.
maybe that would be awesome. I'm always grateful to Dana and the UFC for the things that they have continued to do for me moving forward, and it's always nice, when they do things for us. Unfortunately, the last time we all got together was, Stephen Bonner had passed, which tragedy, such a tragedy for his fans, his family, for the UFC as well. And it's just unfortunate, and you bringing that you making me think about it, now that it makes it seem so long ago and how much stuff has happened in those 19 years. It's crazy, man. Loden passed years back. Stefan, it's you know, makes you feel, it makes you feel your mortality, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I was going to ask about Loden and Stefan a little bit later, but since you mentioned it there, what are some of the memories that come to mind when you think of those guys, if you're okay with that?
You know, Loden, I thought that they were both, you know, great and funny guys, you know, individually. You know, I think, you know, as human beings, we all have our flaws, right? You know, and getting put on the public stage on the level that we did with the, you know, the first season and the explosion of the UFC after that, you you get to see those things exposed a little bit more. But I don't think that some of those things define those guys, and I have fond memories of them. I thought that Loden, I really liked Loden. He was a funny guy. Um, I was bummed that I had to fight him. You know, um, it was, you know, he was just a fun guy to have around. You know, he was a character. He was quite a comedian. Um, Stefan, you know, I mean, his career speaks for itself. I know a lot of, for some reason, the whole controversial fight that we had and me quote unquote losing, you know, I think a lot of people think that I have animosity towards him for that, but I never did. I think Stefan doesn't like, you know, I mean, I don't know if Stefan liked me. There were some things, you know, there's the issue with Chris Lieben and some other things that went on in the house. There might have been some friction, but professionally, I thought he was a great guy. I followed his career, you know, avidly. You know, I always felt like I was at least as good a fighter as him. And so every time I watched him fight and win, I was like, oh, I could have beat that guy, you know? So it's like it, when he shined, it kind of made me feel a little bit better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember, not to make this about me because we're here talking to you, but at a UFC Fan Expo, I was 10 years old and I met Stefan.
Wow.
Yeah,
How,
and like, oh,
how old are you now?
I'm 25 now.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, so like obviously I got into the sport pretty young for that time. Obviously now you see more kids kind of following it since you've seen like McGregor and things like that. But no, there wasn't that many fans of my age around that time. And that was a card in the UK. They had a fan expo, and I met Stefan. And obviously, at that age, that was such a huge thing because, like, he was one of the bigger name guys that I'd met at that point.
Yeah, I can imagine that was a big deal.
And like, we have a similar name. He's Stefan. I'm Steven. That was cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a
Yeah.
great memory to have. Did you get like a, you know, like a sign thing that you have? Do you still have it? Did you keep it like
Yeah, I've got it. That's awesome.
Nice. That's awesome.
It's really cool. Actually, we mentioned the first episode. I watched the first episode earlier today just to like refresh the memory a little bit. I'm not going to ask you too much about it. Don't worry. But that episode, the one thing that struck me watching it was that episode was so different to pretty much every other Ultimate Fighter episode in that it was simply the guys getting drunk in the house, essentially, right? There wasn't that much training. Obviously, there was no fight at the end. It seemed like a different show. So when you were coming into it, what was the vibe kind of like?
I mean, I think the reason that the first season in part stands out is because nobody knew what they were doing. You know what I mean? It's like we come into the house and it's just the only food they have for us there is like Hot Pockets and Snickers ice cream bars, and then all the alcohol you could possibly drink, right? And so I don't think the producers understood, like they thought that we were just these, you know, these thug guys probably that got drunk every night and if you looked at them wrong would, you know, try to punch your lights out. They didn't realize that, I mean, most of the guys on Tough were, you know, they'd been to college, they had college degrees, they were, you know, accomplished athletes in other sports before they became martial artists. And I just think it was a learning experience for everybody. And I think that added a lot of the drama to the show because there was a lot of friction between the cast and the crew. And so I feel that friction, it played a little bit into the drama of between all of the cast members, right? Whether that was planned by the producers themselves or that just happened, you know, but whatever happened on that show, ultimately, like the way I look at it, is it made for probably still the best season ever. I mean, all the other seasons to come and paled and tried to imitate the first season and failed. So, I mean, even to this day, they're always trying to make a new Chris Lieben, a new Bobby Southworth, a new Stephen Bonner, Forrest Griffin, Diego Sanchez, and they'll never do it. You know what I mean? It's like they broke the mold with us. We broke the mold. So, you know, it was a great experience and kind of a feather in our cap, so to speak.
I think the way I think of it, comparing that season to the rest of the seasons, was that season was getting a load of fighters and making a reality show, and the other seasons, it's a reality show, but it's a reality show where fighting is such a huge part of it.
Yes.
When, like, obviously you guys were doing the challenges every week, it's just a different show.
Yeah, it was a totally different show. And I think, you know, it was a learning experience, and obviously they learned a lot in the subsequent seasons after that. And the show has become, I mean, it's crazy. When I watch the show now, I see them, they go to the house. It's like they didn't have any workout stuff for us. You see their house, they've got like assault bikes, treadmills, they've got a sauna at the house, workout stuff at the house. And it was like, we couldn't even get chicken breasts. We could, you know what I mean? To eat healthy food, we could get a 12-pack and a fifth of whiskey if we wanted to, but it was like pulling teeth to try to get like real stuff. And initially all of our training, that the extra training that they're doing at the house, we didn't have any of that stuff there. And so they would take us to like a YMCA. That was where we were doing the weight cutting and all of the extra stuff that you saw us doing. It wasn't at what was then the Ultimate Fighter gym or the pre-performance center. They didn't have any of that stuff. These guys have it easy now. It's crazy. But you know, it's a different world. And the company's making money. They were flying, you know, they were doing it. They were on a shoestring budget, right?
Yeah.
Flying by the seat of their pants, not really sure, just winging it, you know, and luckily they rolled the dice and they didn't crap out, you know what I mean? So it worked out great. So for the company. So it was great.
Yeah. So it's fair to say that you came into the show with more experience, a bit more of a name than pretty much everyone else on the show. Is that fair to say?
I think I had a little bit more of a name because I had fought in Pride, right?
Yeah.
But when I fought in Pride, that was only my like third or fourth fight.
Mm.
So there were plenty of guys on the show that had more fights than I had. I just don't think that they had gotten called up, or, you know, I'm not even sure how, you know, the whole Pride fight, the whole thing with Vitor Belfort, there was a lot of guys that they wanted to fight Vitor before me, but none of those guys would fight Vitor. And so they just kept going down the line. And I was kind of the guy that stepped up. And it was probably really early in my career. I wasn't ready for that fight. And I took it like on 2 or 3 weeks notice. So it was and I lost. So, you know, I had been on the big stage, but there were, I mean, Diego had like 20 fights, I think, when we went on the show. And I think when I was on the show, I had like 9 or 10 fights. So I think Nate Cordy a lot of guys had more fights than me. I just had one fight that was, you know, at that time, Pride was the thing, right? The UFC really hadn't taken over the whole industry. And so, yeah. I mean, I felt at the time I was the best fighter. Like if you look like in the gym and on paper and the things that I'd done, I felt I was the best light heavyweight there. But that's one of the beauties of the sport, is it's not what happens on paper. It's what happens under the lights. It's what happens day in and day out. And that's one of the toughest things about being on the show, is that it's a 24/7 interview. Like, do you watch the Contender series at all? They call it the toughest interview in sports or something like that. I still think that The Ultimate Fighter is the toughest interview in sports, because the cameras are, I mean, there's cameras on you. The only time there's not a camera on you is if you shut the door when you go, you know, to do your business in the morning. You know what I mean? When you go drop a deuce on the toilet, that's the only time the camera's not going to be in your face. Everywhere else, there's cameras everywhere. If it's not a guy with the camera, like literally following you around everywhere. And that's tough to deal with. You know, nobody I don't think very many people have experienced that in life. And the guys who go on the show now, sorry to babble, the guys that go on the show now, they've seen that for the last, like you said, the 19 years. So they're kind of prepared for that scenario of having the cameras in their face 24/7. I don't think any of us were ready for that magnitude of scrutiny. I mean, you'd wake up at 3 a.m. and there'd be like some creepy camera in your face. It was an experience.
Yeah. You obviously say there that you felt you were the best rider on the show. You obviously came in with a bigger name, you say. You were also the first pick. Did you feel pressure because of those things to perform on the show?
Not really, and I'm not trying to be, there's a really thin line between being confident and arrogant.
Yeah.
And I was the first pick, and if you watch the first episode, there's a whole workout that we're going through where we're doing striking, where we're doing grappling, where we're doing all these things. And I kind of felt like a lot of those guys were trying to do that's how, like, I think either Forrest or I think it was Stefan got a cut or something like that. If you remember, one of them got cut from sparring with the other one.
Yeah, there was a headbutt. Stefan got cut.
Yeah, it was a headbutt. And so all these guys were like going super hard. Like they were bringing their A game. And I felt like, man, I'm like in second or third gear and these guys are giving it everything they got. And so that kind of gave me confidence. I don't think I really felt the pressure to perform. I think what I just talked about, like that pressure, and that's how I was saying it's the toughest interview, is the pressure of having the cameras in your face the whole time. I think that is really what kind of wore me down, is that mental load of the friction between the crew, the cast, always having the cameras in your face. I think that really affected my performance on the show. That, and obviously, I mean, a lot of people don't know I walked away from the sport. So I only had 2 weeks notice to get ready for the show. Like I was one of the last cast members selected. And I was like, when they cast me for the show, I was like 253 pounds. Right. And so I lost maybe, I don't know, 7 pounds getting ready for the show. When we walked onto the show, I was 248 that first week. I started losing weight. Then I dieted. I lost like 10 pounds that first week and a half on the show to 230, got down to 237. And then they told us we had that 5 days to get ready to fight. And I lost another 10 pounds to get to 227 and then had to do that weight cut. And so that was a big deal too, my weight being a factor. And so I don't know. Sorry, I keep babbling. I didn't really feel pressure. I thought I was better than a lot of these guys, and I wasn't even prepared. A lot of the guys had noticed that they were going to be on the show, and so I wasn't really prepared. So I don't want to sound arrogant, but that's just how I felt. And that's the beauty of fighting, is it didn't work out that way, right? You have to bring your A game day in, day out, and eventually it got to me, and I showed up with a less than A game, mentally. I was physically in it, and I lost the fight, and that's just part of the game. There's ups and downs to the game, and you got to roll with that and try to come back.
Yeah, obviously, you talk about that weigh-in or that weight cut. That's quite a famous scene. That's quite a famous sequence of the show.
Still, man, still 19 years later, I'm still the only guy to make the weight of anybody that had weight issues, and my weight cut has been bigger than anybody else's ever. And I still made the weight. So that's definitely something I'm very proud of, like a feather in my cap. So I love that. I love when people show that scene. It's like, it's funny too, because they try to make it like I didn't want to make the weight, like I was trying to quit. And I never was trying to quit. I was just so drained that I was asking, my teammates needed to help me. And if it wasn't for like Chuck and Forrest and Josh Koscheck dragging me into the sauna and forcing me to do it, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wouldn't have been able to physically get back into the sauna, but I never didn't want to make the weight. So, I think of that. I have no real conscious recollection of like a 50-hour period. Like I tell this story. I've told this story often. Like when I was sitting with my wife and we were watching the show, the second round starts and I come out and I hit Loden with that 3-piece combo and I run in to like finish him off. And then John tackles me and pushes me into the cage because Loden was like kind of, knocked out. And I'm looking at her. I'm, well, that's not what happened. I'm, well, that's not how it happened. I'm like, I only hit him one time. My recollection was the second round started and he came out and threw a kick that I checked and hit him with one right hand and dropped him. That's my literally coherent memory in my brain. And she's all, babe, what are you talking about? She's all, it's right there on video. They're not fit, And I know, I'm like, I know. And that's where I realized how like the physical toll that weight cut took on me. Like up until maybe 2 hours before the fight, I was still having, if I moved wrong, I was still having these cramps that would cramp me into this fetal position where the guys would have to open me up. It was crazy. Like after the weight cut, the 10 hours after the weight cut, if I turned the wrong way, it looked like my stomach would cramp up and it looked like there was something crawling around under my abdomen because my body was getting convulsed and contorted because it was crazy. I've never felt anything like that. And I hope I never feel anything like that again. It was, yeah. I mean, I really think I probably was real close to seizing. So yeah. I'm thankful it didn't happen. And I really have no recollection of like that, I don't know, 36, whatever a day and a half period is until like after the fight. There's no coherent timeline. It was crazy.
That's crazy. I just want to go back to we were talking about the Stephan Bonner and Forrest Griffin sparring session where they had the cut. There was a moment in that when they're going for it. They're obviously going hard. It's a great spar. And they got Chuck and Randy telling them both to calm down. I think that's an excellent bit of foreshadowing for the final.
Yeah, oh, for sure. For sure. You're right. And they're trying to kill each other. And, that's those guys, they were about it. So.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to watch the final live? I know you'd already fought earlier in the night. Were you done?
Oh, yeah, I was in the audience. It was like one of the first fights that my whole family came to see me fight. And so we were sitting up there in the audience having beers and watching the fight. It was crazy, man. It was super crazy. Couldn't believe it.
It just like it was like a smaller building as well, more of an intimate building. That must have just been incredible.
I mean, that arena, I can't remember the name of it, but it seats about 10,000 people. So it wasn't super small. It wasn't like being at the Apex. So there was a lot of people there. I mean, there was a good crowd. But yeah, I mean, you've probably been to some live events, and anybody who watches, like, if there's nothing like being there live. I mean, if you love watching the fights on TV, especially the UFC, because I've been to some pro boxing fights as well. But I mean, there's a big takedown. It's like, or you see the guy click. I mean, there's nothing like really being there and really feeling that energy. You can't really experience it from television.
Yeah. I think that's almost a good place to round off the Ultimate Fighter chat. I just want to say, obviously, there's two things that people will remember from that season specifically. There's the weight cut, and there is also the situation with yourself, Koscheck, and Lieben.
Yeah.
Just looking back, having to watch that back, what is that like? And obviously, we don't know how they've edited things, because we talk about the editing. They've filmed all week. It's a 40-minute show. You don't know how they're going to edit things. What's that?
There's editing, but that's one of the scenes which is it's pretty true to fact. It's the thing I think when I see that, because like I get the most hate out of that. I feel like that incident, like everybody says, oh, you put the water on Chris Lieben and you did this and you did that. And honestly, I didn't do anything. I was standing there. Go back and watch that again, because me and Josh are in the back and we're talking about the prank. Nobody remembers this. My idea was to put the hose on the little thing above Chris and let the water trickle down and soak him. And then we would be in the back still drinking. And then he would wake up and get mad and ask who did it. And we would try to play it off, right? But as soon as I turned the hose on, Josh just dumps it in his face. And nobody seems to remember that. Everybody, like, from that point on, it's only Bobby Southworth. But if that was true, why did he go running after Josh Koscheck, right? My part in it, that most people, they think about the water. It's the fatherless bastard thing. That's the thing that I did. right? Obviously, not my finest moment. And I've apologized to Chris publicly and personally several times, and we've reconciled. You know what I mean? It's not like we're best buddies or like he calls me over to Sunday dinner or anything, but we've definitely buried the hatchet. He has a gym in San Diego. I have family in Oceanside. I told him the next time I come out, I'd love to visit his gym and train at his gym. And he said, "Yeah, you're more than welcome to come." So hopefully we can make that happen.
That's awesome. That damn Josh Koscheck always making things worse.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a great fighter, great character. You know, he was very good at playing the heel. A lot of people don't know he's a pretty good dude. And you know, other than the things that they've seen on the Ultimate Fighter, you know, you know, he was you talked about earlier the company joining up with the pro wrestling. Josh Koscheck was what's happening with the UFC now, 19 years before it ever happened, right? He was him and Chael Sonnen were some of the first guys to bring that pro wrestling stick into the MMA scene, and he did it very well and was very successful in his career.
Yeah. Are there many guys from the season you keep in touch with nowadays? With regularly?
Not super regularly. You know, I reach out to Forrest every so often just to say, hey, touch base, ask him how his family's doing. And sometimes I have some issues that he can help me out with because of his position with the UFC. I talk to Dana regularly. I'll text him about fights that are happening and he'll respond. But I reach out to Josh Koscheck a little bit. But a lot of us have gone our separate ways. You know, we pick up at the reunion. It's at the reunions or obviously like at the memorial. And it's crazy. You know, when I see those guys, it's like all of a sudden, zap. It's like time warp. You're back 20 years ago, you know, talking about situations and it feels like they just happened yesterday. But I feel like a lot of the guys are doing well and I'm happy for them, you know, and I wish everybody the best.
Yeah, so obviously we know season 32 is in the works. There's a lot of criticism that after 19 years, the show is pretty stale. The format's almost identical. Obviously, your season's a bit different. We talked about that. But other than that, it's pretty identical. What do you think they could do to kind of change the show to make it appeal to fans again?
I think it's hard to say. You know what I mean? I'm not like I'm not the smartest tool or the sharpest tool in the shed in terms of that. But I think it would be better for them to they have everybody in one house. I think it might be better to do like multiple houses, you know what I mean? Where they have 3 people from a team and 3 people from another team in one house, right? So where it's more broken up and the draw it's a little bit separated, where it's the group dynamic is a little bit smaller. I think that might help. But again, I'm no genius. I'm no cinematographer. Otherwise, I'd be writing screenplays and television scripts. So that's why those guys make the big bucks. And I'm in San Antonio.
Obviously, after that, you went to Strikeforce. I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. Strikeforce, you won the championship there, Light Heavyweight Championship. But I want to know about that Playboy Mansion show.
What about it?
that just sounds like such a crazy concept. What was that experience like?
It was, you know, it wasn't as good as it could have been because I was one of the later fights. So the guys that, you know, they fought earlier, they got to go out and mingle with the guests and, you know, they had a whole like buffet of really good food and alcohol and stuff like that. And so some of the guys got to do that. By the time I had finished my fight, they were shutting all that down and then they were getting us off the property and back to our hotel. So it was awesome to be at the Playboy Mansion, but it was better for some of the guys on the card than others. But I can say that I've been to the Playboy Mansion, right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool, right?
Not a lot of that's kind of an elite. That's not a lot of people can say that. So It was cool. You know, it's a beautiful place, but you know, a lot of it was shut off. But from what I can see, the grounds were beautiful and it was a great experience. But it could have been better.
Did you meet Hugh Hefner? That's the real question.
I did not get to meet Hugh Hefner, unfortunately.
No.
Yes, I would have loved to have gotten a picture. Who wouldn't want to get a picture with Hef?
Perfect.
It would have been awesome.
I know you're still a big fan of the sport to this day. Who are some
Very
of
good.
your favorite fighters to watch these days?
Man, there are so many great fighters. It's crazy how with the expansion of the sport, not just the parity, right? You have the guys and you have the elite fighters, top 15 and above. But as you go down the ranks, the parity among the levels of those guys and the drop off, at least in the UFC, it's not that great. This is going to be this fight with Dricus and yes, it's Dricus and Sean Strickland. That's going to be
Yeah,
right. That's going to be a great
yeah,
fight. Um, I think Dricus really has a chance. I think I don't know who's counting him out, but I mean, that guy can. I mean, if he puts his hands and feet on you, he can do some real damage. But Strickland, he's one of those. He's an anomaly. He doesn't have the cleanest style. But he is an effective fighter. It's going to be a great fight. I like watching both of those guys fight. I like watching some of the lighter weight fights. God, I was just watching the card. There's a couple really good fights on the card, but it's so hard for me to remember because there's been. I mean, I was fighting for 6 years before the Ultimate Fighter, and there's 25 years of fights, and not only
yeah.
was I fighting, but I was cornering guys, helping train guys, and so it just all jumbles. It all just jumbles together. I like Jamal Hill. I think he's a great fighter. I'm a big fan of Ankalaev. I was very
Yeah.
happy to see him get, to vindicate himself from that with that victory. I like Jan Blachowicz, even though he was fighting when I was fighting, and he's still doing it. He's a great fighter. So I like to watch my weight class a lot if I can. At 85, I love to watch Adesanya. I think he's a little bit, style bender. I think he's a little too stylistic. I think he could go out there and be a little more direct and get the job done. And I think that would be more fan friendly. Who else? Who is there at the welterweight division? Man,
Leon.
there's just too many. It's like I would need to open a book and start
Yeah.
going down the list and saying this guy, this guy, this guy, because there's so many guys that I just can't draw a beat on any of them. So yeah, it's crazy. And the crazy thing
Yeah.
too is I'm a diehard UFC fan, but there are some great fighters fighting in some of these other organizations as well. So, it's crazy. I try to explain to people, I go, man, when they let us watch that fight on season, we got to watch UFC 37 and a half while we were on the show in 2005. Okay. The UFC started in 1993. So that means in 12 years, they had only done 37 UFCs, right?
Yeah.
By the time it was 2011, what UFC were they on? They were like up in the 170s or 180s. And that doesn't
Yeah.
even include the fight nights, the UFCs on Fox, right? That's just the pay-per-views. So the explosion of the sport has just been beyond exponential. It's just crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, you mentioned the 37 fights there. Now you're getting that a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
Not
Yeah.
just that, every weekend there's going to be a UFC. Dana straight out walked off with Saturday night. I don't know what, there used to be NFL Saturday night game. There used to be boxing. There used to be basketball. Dana and the UFC, they walked off with the Saturday night programming. So they've done a really good job. And then there's the PFLs, the ones, the Bellator. I mean, there's so many, it's crazy.
Yeah. You mentioned PFL there. I wanted to ask you, what do you make of the PFL and Bellator deal?
I don't know. I still think that the UFC is still, they're still the NFL, right? And these are the other organizations, at least the United States organizations, they're still like the Canadian Football League to the NFL kind of a thing. You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that they don't have great fighters and that they don't have potential. But what I see in these other promotions is you have their top 5, their top 10. But as soon as you get outside of that, the level of the talent falls down where you can go 30 deep on the UFC roster and you have guys that could be vying for the top 15 in any weight class. You know what I mean? Their talent pool is much deeper. So,
yeah. Yeah. One more thing I want to ask you about before we
No
wrap up
problem.
here. One of the biggest stories in MMA at the minute is the antitrust lawsuit against the UFC. Obviously, it's in the discovery phase at the minute. There's a lot of things coming out, especially in terms of finances. I'm not sure how much you know, but obviously John Fitch, Kung Lee, two AKA guys who you would have been very close to, I assume, in California, really instrumental in
Yep.
getting that lawsuit off the ground. So what are your thoughts on that situation?
You know, it's a tough situation. It's hard because I think of those guys as friends and I don't want to say anything negative against them. But the bottom line is when we all, the UFC's contracts are pretty straightforward and nobody's forcing you to sign them. You know what I mean? And we all wanted to fight in the UFC. I mean, if you had seen the contract that we signed for the Ultimate Fighter, it was literally this thick. It was huge. And you're literally signing your life away in perpetuity, just like any of the UFC contracts. But everybody signed their name knowing that going in. And it's kind of, I mean, think about this. Like these guys are worrying about money and they want to get a piece of they want to get paid retroactively. Well, when I did the Ultimate Fighter, the UFC was $40 million in the hole.
Yeah.
1 year, the year after that, we did the Ultimate Fighter, they made $375 million. Where's my cut? You know what I'm saying? It's, and I'm not complaining about that. Maybe those guys have a bone to pick. It's not my bone to pick. I signed the contract. It's tough being a fighter, right? And I knew this going in. Like if you look at boxing, there are the number of boxers who are successful later in life or who hold on to their money later in life. You see the guy, the Oscar De La Hoyas, the Evander Holyfields, all those guys that hold on to their money and become successful. But for every one of those guys, there are 100,000 boxers that are driving trucks, you know what I mean, that are pushing brooms. And I think that in the back of all of our minds, we know that that's the possibility. And so, you shoot your shot, you shoot for the stars. And sometimes, it's like the Icarus, right? You fly, you shoot for the stars, you fly too close to the sun and it's a long way back to earth. You know what I mean? But that's part of the challenge of it. You know what I mean? And so I don't want to say anything negative about those guys. It's just not for me. It wasn't I wouldn't have gotten involved in that lawsuit because I signed my contract, I shot my shot, and I fell short. And I did my best, and my best wasn't good enough. That's how the cards crumbled, and you have to move forward, or I had to move forward, and it's just each guy has to make his own decision, and I hope I hope it works out for them and everything works out, and maybe they make money, but that's just not the way I would go about making money. But those guys made it higher in the UFC than I did, and I don't know what went on behind the doors or anything like that, and I haven't even been paying attention to that lawsuit. I don't even know what they're alleging about or anything because I just didn't pay attention to it. So I hope it works out the best for those guys, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Obviously, just
I'm trying to stay neutral. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I mean, you've got guys on both sides. I get it.
Yeah, and I see their point, and I also see the UFC's position as well. Like you signed this contract, and that's they're just sticking to their guns, and I don't know. I don't want to defend anybody, but I also Dana's done a lot for me. It's like if I call him up for tickets, it's like I'm sitting on the floor with the celebrities. I can bring 5 or 6 people. Dana's done a lot for people. You hear about the backroom checks that he gives people. There's money that they put out that people don't know about, things that they do that people don't know about. And so, and I'm pretty sure some of those guys that are involved in the lawsuit got some of those checks as well. Or, were they complaining then? You know what I mean? And it's like, is the UFC complaining now about the money that they gave them out of their pocket? You know what I mean? And so it's just a tough issue to pick a side on. So
Yeah.
hopefully it works out
No.
the best for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair answer.
Business is tough.
Obviously,
The fight game is, being a promoter is tough. Being a fighter is tough. But I think that everybody knows that going in. And maybe maybe you just got to move on. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
but I don't know. I was never on that level. I don't know, the millions of dollars that have been made off certain fighters and their names and their likenesses and things like that. I'm not privileged to that. So if it's big money, maybe they do have a bone to pick. If it's like $50,000, I don't think the 7-year antitrust lawsuit is really going to be worth it. But at the same time, I'm wondering if they win, am I going to get any money? You know what I mean? So, but I don't think so. So because it doesn't, I think the years that are named in the lawsuits,
I think
after,
the first one's I think it's 2010 onwards.
Yeah, and
Maybe a little bit
I
earlier.
fought my last fight in Strikeforce in 2008, I think.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include, I only had the one fight under the Zuffa banner on the Ultimate Fighter finale, and then the other 2 fights on the show. So that, it's,
yeah.
So maybe I don't even know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? But hopefully everybody's happy when the dust settles.
Yeah. After that one, a bit more of a laid back one to finish off with. Obviously, UFC 300 is just around the corner. Huge milestone event. As a fan of the sport right now, if you could make any fight to put on that card, what would it be?
I haven't even seen the card. What's the main event?
So we don't know the main event yet.
I mean, if I was going to make the fight, it would probably have to be John Jones versus somebody. That's what I think would have to be the main event.
Yeah, he's unfortunately, I mean, it's bad timing. He's out injured at the minute, isn't he? So,
he's out.
Yeah. I mean, it's April, so if he was able to do that Stipe fight in November or back in November when he got hurt, maybe they could have done something. It's just unfortunate.
The fight that I really am going to be interested in, and I don't know if it would be good enough for them. It's already happening, isn't it? I really want to see the Volkanovski. Isn't he fighting Ilya Topuria?
Yeah, that is
that's
February.
The fight.
That's next month.
That's a fight I'm really interested. I wish that fight could have been on this card, because ever since Topuria came into the UFC, I've been like, wow, man, this guy's something else. But with Volkanovski, I mean, every single fight he comes out, except for the last one where he got caught with the head kick, right? He comes out and he does something incredible. I mean, The guy is just a winner. No matter what, he finds the game plan, the technique. I mean, he does something that just elevates his game and pushes him to the next level. So I would love to see him fight on that card, but he's already got that fight. So who else?
Alex Pereira is one that's been talked about quite a bit.
I mean, he's had some great fights and everything. I'm not the biggest fan. I think he's a great kickboxer and everything. I think that as that mystique starts to wear off, I think his success in MMA is probably going to be limited. I think that people are going to figure out ways to beat him. But at 205, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see him fight where he's not cutting the massive amount of weight that he was. We'll see if he carries that power to the 205 division when he's fighting the upper echelon fighters. That would be a good fight. I'd like to see him fight Ankalaev. Yeah, I'd like to see him fight Magomed Ankalaev, but Ankalaev just fought. God, like I said, I would need to have the roster laid out in front of me.
Yeah. That's right.
There's just so many fighters, and I watch the fights. Like, I really love watching the fights. I don't really get involved in all of the behind the scenes, like, oh, this guy's number 3 and he should fight this guy to get the next title shot. It's, you know what I mean? I don't look at it like I'm not in it like it's fantasy football, or like I'm betting, I'm in a betting pool or something like that. I just love to watch good fights. All the other stuff doesn't really matter to me. So
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be enough good fights at UFC 300, and that UFC 299 card is stacked as well. That's a big one. So
Yeah,
it's
there's
going
a
to be
lot of
it's
great.
going to be it's going to be a good next few months of fights.
I agree. I was impressed by the card they just had last weekend. There were some
Yeah,
solid fights on that
that was a
card,
really
and I
good
was like,
card.
I thought when I watched the first, I thought it was going to be another one of those cards. I'm like, are they going to start this year off with the card where it's all the fights are finishes? Because all of those fights did have the potential to be
That was,
finishes, but
yeah,
then it
there
slowed
was only
down
what?
as it slowed down the deeper in it got. But it was still a good card.
Yeah, there was only 3 or 4 decisions. What won that? What do you think of the Apex cards? What do you think of the Apex environment? Rather,
I like it. I actually there was an eight when we were there for Stefan's memorial. The night before his memorial, there was an Apex card, and I was fortunate enough that we got to go and see it. I like it. I like the
yeah,
Apex. I think it's like how you were saying, it's more intimate. So I like it, but I've been to so many, not just UFC fights, but just fights in general. So I took a couple of my students, and it was their first live event, and I was
yeah,
explaining to them after the difference. I'm all, you know, and so we were lucky. So we got to go to the Apex, and we were on the Howler Head VIP. So there was free catered food, free drinks, so that's a huge plus, right? But
yeah.
there wasn't
Sounds pretty good.
15,000 people. You know what I'm saying? And so it's different. The energy there, you still got the roar of the crowd, but it was nothing like, I mean, when you're at a pay-per-view, or when you're on a fight night card and there's 15,000 people, it's a tidal wave. You really feel the crowd's energy, and the Apex is a little bit too intimate to really get that same feeling. But as a fight fan, I loved it because we were right there. Like, we were sitting like maybe 15 feet and a little bit off
Yeah,
from behind where Bisping was calling the fights, right? And then it was fun too because it was catered Persian food, and all the liquor was top shelf. You know what I mean? So we enjoyed ourselves, and it was a good time.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I like the Apex, but I would prefer to be in a big venue.
Yeah, Cage Warriors over here did some shows they called Unplugged, which are similar to like the Apex. I went to one of those. It's a unique experience. It's definitely. I mean, if you can get to one, it's definitely a good experience to get to. We didn't
I've
have all
never
the
been to
we
the
didn't have all the
UK.
catered food,
I've
but
been to Australia, but I've never been to the UK. That's definitely a trip that I want to make. And if I get over there, hopefully I'll be able to see a card. There's a lot of good fight. There's a lot of talent in the UK.
yeah,
There's a couple young, like, I don't know if they're Welsh or Scottish kids, I think, that are making waves. The Jack Shore, maybe. I think there's
Jack
another
Shaw, yeah,
Southpaw. I mean, I'm impressed by the well-roundedness of their game, right? I would expect everybody coming from the UK to have solid striking skills, right? But the grappling skills and the wrestling skills, where I felt like where the UK was behind a few years ago, some of these guys have really closed the gap, and I've been impressed by some of the talent that's been coming out.
yeah. I mean, you look at Leon Edwards now. Obviously, he wasn't like that at the start, but he took down Usman, he took down Colby, two like traditional American wrestlers, right?
Exactly.
You never
Yes.
see British fighters do that before.
we we used to joke that Brits had hands but no grappling.
Yeah.
So, you expect them to have good boxing, good Thai boxing, but the grappling game, definitely in the last 10 years or so, the level has gone up. So
Yeah.
maybe because Hodger
Yeah.
Gracie moved over there and is teaching over there, I
Yeah.
don't know. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of good coaches over there. So
On the grappling, just quickly, I know we're way over the time we said before we started, but this just came to me. You basically brought grappling to a kickboxing gym, aka you implemented the jiu-jitsu program there.
I did implement the jiu-jitsu program there, but they already had, I don't know if you remember, Javier had one of his first proteges, this guy named Brian Johnston, who fought in the early days of the UFC, and they had a submission grappling program. And when I went to AKA, I was walking in to meet Javier as Frank Shamrock was walking out, and he was literally like 2 nights removed from winning the King of Pancrase title, where he knocked out Enson Inoue. So they had a Shamrock submission fighting thing going on there, and they also had Brian Johnston's submission wrestling thing going on there. But when I got there, I kind of proved that jiu-jitsu was the superior art. So it was a good experience. I was lucky, Brian is a super nice guy. Javier, he was the one who got me in there and won me over with Javier, because the way Javier told me, Brian doesn't like a lot of people and he likes you. And he told me that I should let you start a jiu-jitsu program here. Cause I went in and, I submitted all of Brian's guys. I pretty much submitted all of Frank's guys too, but not Frank. But Brian, he was like, oh, he was impressed because it wasn't like I tried to crank his arm or I tried to hurt anybody. Jiu-jitsu is supposed to be the gentle art. And I submitted guys, but I was really nice. I wasn't like cranking them or trying to prove a point. And I wasn't like getting up and flexing like I just won the Olympics or anything like that. And he thought, hey, this guy's nice. He's humble. And he told Javier he thought I would be a good fit. And that was really he's really the one who paved the way. So honestly, if it wasn't for Brian Johnston, my MMA career may never have even gotten off the ground.
Obviously, I know you moved to San Antonio a while ago. Did you ever overlap with Habib, Kane, DC, those guys, or not really?
Oh, Kane, I was there for years with Kane, and I trained with DC for several months because my last fight was either his first or second fight. That was that one when I went to Australia. It was me and DC on the same card for my last fight in either his first or second fight. I can't remember which. Khabib came after me. But any of the fighters pre-2010 that walked through, I was John Fitch's first jiu-jitsu coach. I might have been the first guy to teach. I might have been. No, Dave was coaching then. But I was John Fitch's first jiu-jitsu coach, Christian Wellish, who was a UFC veteran. There's a lot of guys that came through there that I taught some of the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu to. I'm not claiming credit for their fighting careers, but jiu-jitsu is just a part of their arsenal. But, laying the foundations for them and then teaching somebody jiu-jitsu, I think, is the hardest in the beginning because most people quit. So most of the people that I teach, a lot of people I've taught jiu-jitsu to are still doing jiu-jitsu to this day, years later. I was BJ Penn's I was the first guy to formally teach BJ Penn jiu-jitsu, where I was an assistant at the Ralph Gracie Academy in Mountain View. I've had a hand in quite a few people who've gone on to do great things in jiu-jitsu and in MMA, but I'm not trying to claim success for them because they did that on their own. But, helping them get a little bit down the path, I'm proud of that. And I always look back on that and think that that's great. And so teaching jiu-jitsu is hard because most people don't even get their blue belt. So when I see students that I've taught that have trained for 10 years, 20 years, and they're third degree, fourth degree black belts now, I'm proud of that. Instilling the love of the art has always been one of my goals.
Yeah, and obviously you're still able to do that with your new gym. It's perfect segue.
Yes.
Just to finish
it's getting
off
a little bit harder. My shoulder is a little banged up. I'm having some hip issues, but I'm still able to keep up with some of the young guys. And there's a thriving jiu-jitsu community here in San Antonio. Some really good gyms, some solid competitors. We're only about an hour away from Austin, where the B team and the Danaher Death Squad are at. So, I've been up there and gotten to train take some of the classes. There's just this area when I first moved here, it wasn't quite the hotbed that it is now, but there's definitely a thriving jiu-jitsu community in Southeast Texas. And, I'm happy to be involved in that.
Yeah, it's perfect. Just to bookend the chat, we talked at the start about when I met Stefan Bonner. There was two guys at that table, and I didn't even think to mention it until now. Stefan Bonner was obviously at the table. The guy who was doing the signing with him, John Fitch.
Oh, perfect. There you go. There you go. That's awesome.
That didn't even register at the time.
And you should have got a pick. You should have got an autograph because honestly, he's arguably the second greatest welterweight of his era.
I've got that picture. Yeah.
He beat everybody in the UFC, and he only didn't beat GSP for the title. I think GSP is literally the only guy. Is John Fitch's only loss in the UFC? I would have to fact check that, but I think he was
for a while at least, yeah.
For a long time, yeah. Maybe after GSP he lost a fight or two, but before that he was 15-0 or something in the UFC. He had one of the longest winning streaks. He's one of the greatest welterweights ever, and one of the greatest welterweights who never won the title.
Oh, absolutely. And it was his style that kind of held him back a little bit, wasn't it?
I don't think it held him back from winning, but maybe it held him back from winning over the fans and the upper management of the UFC. I think he had a great style. because I'm a jiu-jitsu guy, right? I'm more of a grappler. I have striking as well, but I just loved John Fitch, the way that he would take guys down and just grind them down until they broke, and then pound on them until they just gave away a submission. You know what I mean? I think he had a better style than, say, like a Ben Askren, right? Because John would actually, he would drop guys, he would throw hands, he would go for submissions. He wouldn't just leg hump them to death, right?
I mean, we've seen what Ben does with his hands, and it's not great.
What hands?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he'd probably kick my ass, but he wouldn't beat me in a boxing match. I'll tell you that right now. So, and I'm 54, so he would have. You know what I mean? If he wanted to fight me on one of those Jake Paul cards, I wouldn't even train for it. I'd just show up. So, no disrespect to him. He's just not a boxer. He's not a striker. So
you're a little bit bigger too. You're a light heavyweight. You're a little bit bigger.
That's true.
Than Ben Askren.
That's true. And I'm even a little bit bigger than that. I'm like 245 right now. So, but I'm actually right now lighter than I was when I went on this tough on the Ultimate Fighter.
Crazy.
So that's crazy. You know what I think I'm going to do too? Next year, I think I'm going to do a 20-year challenge and try to make that weight cut down to 205. See if I can get some go viral on YouTube or something like that.
I'm sure you can find one of those other guys to fight too. I'm sure someone will take a fight. Nah.
I'm too old for all that. I like teaching and training with my students. I'm not trying to be a competitor anymore.
Nah, that's great. So now obviously you've talked about what you've got going on with your new gym. Where can people kind of follow and see what you're up to now?
So if anybody wants to follow, you can find me on Instagram, Bobby Southworth at The Real B South. You can find me on Facebook /Bobby Southworth, or you can follow my gym, AKA San Antonio, American Kickboxing San Antonio, at AKA San Antonio on IG, or AKA Texas on Facebook. Give us a follow, check us out. Let us know what you think.
Perfect. I want to thank you for taking the time today, Bobby. Best of luck, obviously, with getting this gym up and running properly. Thank you. Then, hopefully see some of your students make it.